Welcome. My name is Catherine Haley, and I am the Vice President of Programs at the Philanthropy Roundtable. My colleagues and I are thrilled you joined us today for our virtual conference entitled Civic Education, Civic Leadership, and Veterans. Our mission at the Roundtable is to foster excellence in philanthropy, protect philanthropic freedom, and help donors advance liberty, opportunity, and personal responsibility. Virtual conferences like this one are designed to deepen understanding and identify ways philanthropy can strengthen our free society. You may know that today is the Marine Corps' 245th birthday. Yes, the Marines were founded in 1775. And tomorrow we recognize our men and women who have faithfully served our country, defending our principles at home and abroad. As we remember the historic sacrifices of our servicemen and women, veteran serving organizations for more than a century have been at the forefront of helping veterans develop civic leadership skills as they transition into civilian life. Unfortunately, this has not been the VSO's focus in more recent history. There is, however, a movement to revitalize civic education in the United States. And more than ever, there is a need for civic leadership to unite our fractured culture and communities. For donors who are interested in assisting in this work, veterans represent an important asset to help us deepen our knowledge about our Constitution, our values, and our common purpose. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague, Sean Riley, who conceived of this conference. He served in our country in the historic 115th and 75th Infantry Regiment, as well as the 158th Cavalry Regiment. He is a passionate defender of liberty and the values enshrined in our founding documents. Thank you so much for putting this conference together. Now for our first speaker. Facts and figures can certainly illuminate a point, but storytelling hits us at the heart. The issue at hand becomes personal, relatable. It stirs us to action. Brandon Millet is our VP of Marketing and Communication. Before he joined us at the Roundtable, Brandon served as the Chief Communications Officer for the GI Film Festival, a nonprofit he co-founded with his wife. Today, he will share with us some thoughts on how changing the narrative about veterans can help them while at the same time addressing the crisis in civic education engagement. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and happy birthday, Marines. Happy Veterans Day, one day early to those who have served our country. Today, we are talking about the role that military veterans can and really should play in helping our country address the civics education crisis in America. And my particular part of this presentation is to talk to you about storytelling, how storytelling can undermine the stereotypes that deny veterans opportunity in general, but then also specific to civics education. I've really got two objectives today. First, I want to demonstrate the power of storytelling by example. And as Catherine mentioned, I'm going to be using the GI Film Festival. This is an organization I co-founded with my wife about 14 years ago. And then we're going to shift into discussing how storytelling can help make the case that veterans really are the best prepared and the best qualified to lead a civics education renaissance in America. But first, I just want to give you a little bit of information and background, my professional background, also give you an indication of why these issues are so important to me. I am the VP of Marketing and Communications for the Philanthropy Roundtable. Our mission is to build a world-class storytelling operation that shifts how people view philanthropy and capitalism in a way that outpaces our opponents. And if that mission doesn't get your motor running, I don't know what will. But prior to joining the Roundtable, for 25 years, I served as an executive and communication specialist with a variety of organizations inside the liberty and conservative movements. Most recently, I was the co-founder, CEO, chief communications officer as well of the GI Film Festival, which is also known as Sundance for the Troops. That was Bloomberg News. I think WTOP called this Full Metal Film Fest, whichever one you like. I am not a military veteran. However, I am a military spouse. I'm one of those curious creatures known as a male military spouse. Don't know if you've ever seen one. My wife, Laura, is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. She served in the Army and in the Army Reserves as well. Together, we have a daughter named Zoe, who most definitely will not be following in her mother's footsteps and joining the military. I can assure you that. And really, my inspiration for wanting to tell military stories came from becoming a military family. And it really goes back 14 years to a conversation my wife and I had one Sunday morning, just over coffee, talking about how there were too many anti-military movies coming out of Hollywood. She had just seen a film called Buffalo Soldiers. This is a film starring Joaquin Phoenix on screen. You can see uh, where the GIs were portrayed as drug dealers and thieves. And Laura, of course, knew that this didn't reflect the character of the people with whom she had served. You may remember, walk back to 2005, 2006. At that point, the Iraq War was very unpopular, and people were conflating their opposition to the conflict with their opposition to the military. And in Hollywood, this resulted in a slew of anti-military films, films that were denigrating the character of men and women in uniform. You can see a few of them pictured here. In the Valley of Ella, GI murders a brother in arms. Redacted, GI sexually assaults a young girl. Stop Loss, GI goes AWOL. Home of the Brave, GI goes psychotic, and on and on and on. And so Laura and I believe that this had a corrosive impact, not only on public support for the troops, but on troop morale as well. And veterans are being denied opportunities because of these stereotypes that continue to persist. So we decided to do something about it. We decided to produce a counter campaign. But honestly, I did not have any understanding of how difficult this was going to be, how high a mountain we had to climb, until my very first meeting in Hollywood. And I want to tell you about it now. So there I am. I'm in the office of a well-known producer, had produced a bunch of feature films. And he had a rare outlier. He had a pro-veteran film at that time. In fact, it was so rare that he didn't really know what to do with it, which made him just desperate enough to have a meeting with me. We had just started the film festival. He had heard about a military film festival and wanted to see if we could help him promote the film. And as I'm pulling out my PowerPoint presentation, just about ready to launch into my pitch, a screenwriter pops in the office. Again, major film credits. And he asked to speak to the producer, and the producer says, sure, let's go out in the hall, but they still stayed within earshot. This is exactly how the conversation went. The producer says, so what are you working on? And the screenwriter says, well, I'm fixing this great new military thriller set in the Middle East. The only problem, the bad guy is a terrorist, and I don't want to touch that right now. The producer says, well, can't you flip the script and make the bad guy a military person or a defense contractor? And the screenwriter said, great minds, that's exactly what I'm doing. And the producer said, great, send it to me when you have a finished draft. And so I'm sitting there in the office thinking to myself, if I'm hearing this conversation in my very first Hollywood meeting, how many others just like it are taking place all over the city? And it became clear to me then that it wasn't going to be enough to get a film out of this guy. It wasn't going to be enough to get a check. It wasn't going to be enough to get a celebrity to come to our event. There was a systemic problem inside Hollywood within the creative community that needed to be addressed. And really, there were two ways to go about it. We could go on the attack. We could take the hill by force. We could make it political. We could enrage the base. We could target specific producers, directors, and actors. To be honest, I'd used this technique a number of times throughout my career. And what I found is that while you could achieve results, those results were often short-lived. And while you could raise a lot of money, at the end of the day, you really weren't shifting the conversation in any permanent way. The other approach was to win friends and influence people, the Dale Carnegie approach, and engage in what I call radical diplomacy. So we take the hill incrementally, we make friends along the way, build relationships so that when we get to the top, the grass is still green and we have allies instead of enemies. This was much longer term play, but this was the option that we selected. So we built an inside out strategy. From outside Hollywood, we launched an independent film festival. We focused on the other side of the story, the courage and the honor of those who serve. We set up a marketing and distribution apparatus to get these films out into the marketplace. And we also helped military filmmakers to find success in the industry so that they could correct the stereotypes from within. We also launched a Hollywood charm offensive. We began to break down barriers between Hollywood and the military, basically just these two seemingly disparate communities, bringing them together, facilitating introductions. We focused on the ground truth of the GI experience instead of getting involved in taking positions on one particular conflict or another. We also importantly learned how to be of value to the entertainment industry so that they would listen to what we had to say. So we developed a very diverse lineup of films that portrayed the narrative, gave the narrative, or promoted the narrative that we wanted Hollywood to embrace and the public in general. We covered every branch of service. We covered every genre of film. We covered every American conflict. We left politics out of it, But at the same time, we addressed every subject of relevance to the military community, no matter how difficult. Topics like post-traumatic stress and military sexual assault. The difference was, the one common denominator was that GIs were portrayed with respect. It wasn't always easy. The film was sometimes gray, but at the end of the day, we asked this question: do you feel better about our men and women in uniform after watching this film? And if the answer was yes, then the film could screen. So our films went on to win awards at festivals around the country. Some were even nominated for Academy Awards. They also distributed in theaters, online, on demand, in stores, you name it. But I'm a big fan of the concept of show, don't tell. So in order to show you the diversity of the lineup and the type of films that we screened, I want to show you a real quick trailer from one of our festivals so you can see for yourself.
Ask her whose house this is.
Hey!
I'm the only one who knows where that nuke is. I'd say you'd better stop.
Oh my God! We need someone to find the bomb without being detected, but it can't be any of you. Damn it!
Once you go seek that help, it's crossing that LOD, but in a different way. You're not going after danger. You're going after love. You're going after caring. You're going after a family. You're going after what you need to be, to function, and to feel whole again.
There was over 7,000 Huey helicopters in the theater. That helicopter is actually the symbol of the Vietnam War. Fate, I believe, brought this crew together. Now brings us all back together with a ship some 40 years later.
You gave up on our whole family.
If you've ever worn a piece of jewelry for a really long time and been unconsciously gone to move it even though you know it's not there, it's like the phantom limb.
In the summer of 1916, two college juniors from Yale started an air militia in preparation for America entering World War I.
They wanted to go fight for their country.
This is the most important op since the bin Laden strike. This is an opportunity to cripple terrorism at its core.
And we're talking a risk assessment of over 70%.
With a reward of 100%, Major.
This is it, Jackie Dam. What's it all about?
Radio check at the bottom. I'll see you when you get back.
To the location being minefield. What's on here?
But it also went beyond our films. We hosted all sorts of kinds of events. We had filmmaker workshops and boot camps. We had congressional events. We had receptions, awesome after parties, red carpet events with celebrities. You can see some of them pictured here, a group of folks like Kelsey Grammer, Jeremy Renner, Adam Driver, and on and on and on. We also produced, we had concerts for Wounded Warriors. We produced a cinematic salute to the troops. This was a variety show that was shown in AMC, Regal, and Cinemark theaters around the country, 400 of them. The show starred actors Danny Trejo and also First Lady Michelle Obama and Dr. Jill Biden as well. And because of the way we approached our content, we also were able to get great partnerships as well. Lots of corporate sponsors, great brands, American Airlines, Geico, SAIC. We had lots of veteran service organizations as well, including the American Legion. And then around year 7 or 8, KPBS came to approach us from San Diego, and they said, hey, we want to help you expand to the West Coast. So we added a West Coast presence as well. So we were bi-coastal at that point. We also, as I mentioned, we found a way to be of value to Hollywood. We began marketing their pro-veteran films. We had a requirement. If they were going to screen a film, they were going to have to send somebody from the film. So again, we could facilitate those introductions to military veterans. But we closed down Old Town Alexandria, brought Peter Berg and Marcus Luttrell. The Young Marines were there, red carpet event, military vehicles, and did a lone survivor event. Our first screening was Forrest Gump. That was our very first year. Gary Sinise came out to that event. Also want to highlight Taking Chance from HBO. That was an amazing film. And at the end, Chance Phelps' mom, Chance was the Marine who died in the film. We walked down the stairs outside the venue and she stenciled his name on a Marine honor card. You could hear a pin drop. We had the real Max out for the film Max as well. And then there was Disney. We did a number of screenings from them. But the biggest thing about Disney was around year, I want to say 8 or 9, they came to us and said, hey, we want to host an event right on the Disney lot. We want to host a full film festival event. And we want to do it in partnership with our Hiring a Heroes initiative, because we want to show that, you know, by telling better stories, we can help veterans get jobs. So that to us was a major mark of the evolution of the film festival. Of course, press coverage, not just the Fox Newses and other groups like the Military Trades that you think would cover, but lots of mainstream press outlets as well, including the Associated Press, New York Times, Variety magazine as well covered the festival. And we also had a television series that we produced for the Discovery Network's American Heroes channel, Best of the GI Film Festival. We did that also for the Pentagon channel as well to bring the content to troops all around the world. As a result of all of this activity, we were able to flip the script for veterans in Hollywood. Before JIF, virtually all films were negative about the military, denigrated them. After JIF, virtually all films emerging from Hollywood demonstrate respect for GIs, and there's a few you see here, Lone Survivor, I mentioned Hacksaw Ridge, Unbroken. Now, of course, we don't take credit for all of that. There was a whole movement of people who made that happen. But importantly, we were the tip of the spear, the first in, and I think that made a difference. Before the GI Film Festival, no philanthropic programs in Hollywood supporting the military. After the GI Film Festival, there are now 3, including one started by a GI Film Festival filmmaker. The organization is called Veterans in Film and Television, now has 2,000 members. Before the festival, no voice in the entertainment industry for military veterans. After the festival helped to market over 400 pro-veteran films, independent films, and get them into the marketplace. Ultimately, we were successful in fostering a positive image for the troops, and the mission changed. It became then about bridging the military-civilian divide and connecting military veterans in communities around the country. And PBS had a perfect public station apparatus to make that happen. And so they acquired the festival actually earlier this year, and they're going to be expanding it nationwide. Before I leave the GI Film Festival portion of this and then shift over to talking about civics and education, I want to tell you one last story. I call it the clueless executives. So we had a film called The Last 600 Meters we screened at the festival. It was directed by a very talented director named Michael Pack. Michael screened this film for executives in New York. And when the film concluded, one of the guys turned to him and said, how did you do that? You know, how did you cast this film? How did you, the Marines were so intelligent, and so articulate. And Michael said, I don't know what you're talking about. That was a unit. Those were the guys. But I think that this highlights a problem and a stereotype that we need to address if we're going to make the case that veterans are the best qualified, best prepared. And it is a problem, a stereotype that was evidenced when a couple years ago, a former California teacher and council member named Gregory Salcido had this to say about veterans, and worse, by the way. They're not like high-level thinkers. They're not academic people. They're not intellectual people. They're the lowest of our low. Unfortunately, despite the fact that that's flagrantly false, unfortunately, there's a number of people in society who probably think like Gregory Salcido thinks. Of course, we know the truth. The truth is enlisted people in the military, they're better educated, they get better test scores, and they're from higher socioeconomic backgrounds than similarly aged people that are their peers, that according to psychology today. But if we're going to make the case that veterans are going to address and take care of the civics education crisis, that's something we need to tackle. And there is a crisis. If you just take a look at a few statistics, only 25% of Americans can name all 3 branches of government. 70% of Americans don't know the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. 37% of Americans can't name a single right in the First Amendment, and 33% of natural-born American citizens can't pass the citizenship test. And yes, there are actually people in our society who believe that Judge Judy now sits on the United States Supreme Court. Thomas Jefferson said, "An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people." So this civics education crisis is an existential crisis for the United States. The late Sandra Day O'Connor said that, the knowledge of these rights and responsibilities, the knowledge of these institutions, it doesn't get passed along in the gene pool. It's not in the DNA. Each generation of Americans must be taught these basics. And who better to teach these basics than our military veterans? And here's the story we need to be telling. Military veterans are team players. They always put mission first. And in this case, the mission is to solve the civics education crisis. They are teachers. They build nations abroad. They can take that knowledge and teach skills and teach these skills at home. They're consummate volunteers. They volunteer more than non-veterans do. They're also problem solvers. They have to adapt and they have to overcome in very incredibly high pressure situations. And of course, they're also leaders. They know how to lead teams to accomplish tasks. There's also the historical legacy, and our director of Veterans and Civics programs had a great piece in Real Clear Politics, and he makes this point. In 1921, only 2 years after its founding, the American Legion partnered with National Education Association to address widespread literacy and to improve public school instruction in civics history, US government, and physical education. We need to tell the story of this historical link between veterans and civics education. We need to talk about these amazing traits and characteristics that make them the best qualified and the best prepared to take on this challenge. We can do that in a number of different ways. We can do it through public speaking engagements. We can do it through media interviews and social media. We can do it through film and television programming and op-eds and articles and blogs. We can also have public service announcements. I could see a public service announcement campaign coming out of this. Or we could also support organizations that are telling the right stories. And one of those organizations is the American Veterans Center. Each year they hold their Veterans Conference. Hundreds of students from ROTC programs and service academies around the country, they come to DC to learn leadership from military veterans from World War II to the modern wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They have their Wounded Warrior experience where they share inspirational stories about their recovery and then connect veterans to resources as well so that they can recover. The show's broadcast on the Fox Business Channel. Then there's American Valor. This is my favorite program. This is like the Academy Awards for military heroes. Stories of heroism from the last 75 years are told by some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Matthew McConaughey, George Clooney, Scarlett Johansson, Clint Eastwood, and of course, if you're talking narration, you have to mention Morgan Freeman, and he has participated as well. So just in closing, we have a civics education crisis. Majority of Americans, they don't have a basic understanding of America's institutions or the values, American values, civic responsibilities, and this is an existential threat to the United States. Veterans can solve it. Veterans sacrifice their lives in defense of these principles and institutions. They're passionate. They also build democracies abroad. They have great knowledge about how to do that back at home. They're consummate volunteers, leaders, and teachers. This is a huge win-win. Veterans are service-focused. They want to continue serving when they come back home. And at the same time, their connection that they get to their communities helps veterans heal and transition home. So I want to thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back over now to Catherine Haley as she moves the program along. Thanks so much.
Brandon, thank you so much for that, your compelling remarks and the power of storytelling.